Let's talk tourism.
Hitting the record button.
All right.
Gabriel Saragovia is founder of Rio Perdido, one of the America's most unique eco hotels. It's located in Costa Rica's northern volcanic Sierra. Born in Colombia, naturalized in the US, he's got a very unique take on tourism, ecology, and some pretty crazy ideas on how to blend luxury and sustainability. A true Renaissance man. He's a biologist. He's an artist. He's an outdoorsman, and one hell of a mountain biker. Gabriel, let's talk tourism.
I was hoping we could wrap it up there. I can't beat that.
All right. Well, it was great seeing you.
It's nice.
First and foremost, cheers. We don't usually do the PM editions, but it's nice to have what's left of a cocktail.
Mm.
The last sip of a water.
It is a PM edition, and this Tuesday suddenly feels like a Friday.
Right.
Well, thank you for that.
Who can keep track of days anymore?
Yeah, it's all the same.
First question, how the heck did you end up in tourism?
That's a good question. And it's not a romantic answer. It's, well, as you know, my background academically is in the biological sciences and on a seemingly very different level, but they collide, also in the visual arts. Visual arts is, anything from oil painting to sculpting with steel or wood to even the digital arts, such as editing or sound editing. So I wasn't headed in that direction at school, but when I graduated, eventually I started working for some interesting people in the tourism industry. We won't get into that. That could be another time. But I did work for kind of like a very well-known person in tourism. And by that point, my father, who was not in tourism, had invested with a friend, with his college roommate, in a little tourism concept in Costa Rica here. And that eventually, that became known as Tabacon. Tabacon is, as you know, the destination that paved the tourism development in the northern part of the country. Initially based on the area's most beautiful and most generous network of hot springs. So that kind of flung us into the tourism industry. We were not at all ready for it. We are not, my sister's a Cornell grad, but none of us really have anything academically that, is considered a part of or appropriate for this industry. So we had to start from scratch. That being said, I think we did a good job. I think that whether it was the stress of having to get on it or just the love for what we were doing, we picked it up quickly. And I think we did a pretty good job, a little pat on the back. And we were able to make something that I think is unique. And since then, the family has gone in different directions. But I think all of us, for a long time now, have embraced not only tourism, but sustainable tourism. I would say, in my case, way before it was a fad or kind of like a requisite. And that's pretty much the story. I can get into more details, but it was accidental.
So all these years later, you stumble upon the land that eventually becomes the concept for Rio Perdido. Yes. How did that come about? How did the concept come about? What is the concept?
Okay, so as far as stumbling upon, because you use that phrase and it's a very appropriate phrase. It's not just the fact that you're savvy with the colloquialisms, but you also know me very well. Before I was a father, I used to make it a point to get out there at least twice a month. Twice a month, I was off the path. And it was just something that happened, again, accidentally. It was just opening up and not having that inhibition and, getting lost it becomes a part of the concept later on. So uh, in one of those adventures, I stumble upon the volcanic Sierra of Guanacaste. Now, I had already by that point visited so many corners of the country, but I had not really seen this amazing area that is comprised of. They say that there's four volcanoes, but really there's so many little craters. You know, like the Rincón de la Vieja volcano is said to have 9 craters. So it's just this like vein, if you will, of volcanic activity that's occurring in Guanacaste to the east of the airport. So everybody arrives Guanacaste at Liberia, or they come from San Jose and they head west to the coast. But for me, I mean, the beaches are beautiful. Some of them are spectacular and they're not yet exploited, fortunately. But for me, the most impressive parts of this amazing province occur to the east. And it's this whole volcanic area. Now, some of the hikes I've done out there have been, second to none. But that, to answer your question very slowly, that led me to the property. And when I got to this property, it was clear that something had to be done. I was able to bring my father there. Then I was able to bring some other family members, some friends, and we put together a group and we just went on passion.
You might know U.S. national parks as well as anybody that I've ever met. Which U.S. landscapes might you compare that region to?
That's cool that you asked that because I have actually spoken a little bit about this. We get a lot of visitors from Utah and Colorado. They're the ones that seem to click the quickest. Everybody clicks with the concept.
Yeah.
But for some people, like the city slickers from New York, not to dump on them because I love New Yorkers. I love New Yorkers. I have a New Yorker sister. Um, but, it takes them a little bit longer. It might take them a day, even 2 days. But when people from Utah and Colorado arrive, they click instantly. In the landscape, I call it the tropical Utah. It's like if you arrive to, Moab, and all of a sudden it has like, a jungle growing on it. You have these rocks and these amazing formations, and and next to it is a jungle or a canyon with hot water, which is the case of Rio Perdido.
Mm-hmm.
And these, inside the canyon, when there's, water, a source of water all year, you have these trees that are growing up to 150 meters in height. Whereas up in the top, in the really rocky, dry parts, your trees are maybe they're older in age, but they're only maybe 6, 7, 8 feet tall.
Yeah.
Because they're a different type of species. They grow really slowly. They have to deal with dryness and wind and rocky surfaces. So it's this amazing place where you're visually seeing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, what your, I guess your average, your novice to Costa Rica probably doesn't understand is that the country is, the two continents smashed together, and this thing is new Earth coming out of the ocean. We have Pacific and Caribbean so close that you have this convergence of so much biology in such a tiny chunk that it really blows the mind when just driving a few hours,
It's amazing.
how rapidly things can
It's amazing.
change, how different it can look.
I think
So
even
even my first visit to your property, I was like, well, I didn't know we had this.
yeah, isn't that cool? How I get like friends of mine that are nature photographers, and they've
Right.
seen, or you think that they've seen the whole country. And I remember the first time that my buddy Armando Del Vecchio arrived there. He's like, you thought he'd seen it all.
Yeah.
And he turns around and he says to me, "Hey, this is exotic to me."
Yeah.
You know, I can only imagine what it feels like to our New Yorker or
Yeah.
a person from Miami or Los Angeles. They arrive to this place and it's like, what's going on here? You have a jungle going on in the canyon. You have a desert going on up here. You have a savanna over there. You have these springs of hot water and cold water at the same time. Like one is over there, one is over here. This one's cold, that one's hot. This one's got like a ton of minerals. This one is, drinking water, tap water.
The only
Um,
place in the world that I could think of that I've been to that is that just, wait a minute, 2 hours away, it's this different, is South Africa. You know, where you have these desert plains, you have jungle, you have ocean. You're like, this is all one place. Now, granted, that's a gigantic
Yeah,
country.
it's a bigger area. It's
Yeah.
hard to, well, in Costa Rica, the thing is, as you said before, and a lot of people say you can drive not 3 hours, you can drive, well, in the case of Rio Perdido, you literally come out of the canyon and you're in a different ecosystem. When you're driving, you could drive 1 hour and not see two or even three, maybe four completely different ecosystems.
It's
And
crazy.
it goes back to what you said about the clashing of these tectonic geological plates.
I think I have a visitor. All right, get out of here. That's my first one I've ever had interrupted by the kids.
I love that they're there.
Yeah, yeah.
So
This
are we
is
going to ask them? Are we
this
going to
is
ask them questions?
come all right out of here, you bums.
That's funny. They
We
got
you and
scared.
I talk a lot about wellness travel and changes in traveler trends and preferences, particularly coming out of an event as big as COVID. All right, you bums, get out of here.
Well, do you want me to ask them?
What do you see or what are you seeing in terms of change in traveler preferences? Or
Well,
what predictions might you have? What do you think is going to change?
okay. So I think that even the people that were reticent to changing their habits have done so now out of necessity. I think that, and again, this goes into the whole concept of passive wellness, which is something that I've been preaching about a little bit, because not because because I want to draw attention to myself, but because I think it's going to change the way we look at travel. I think that we're going to blur the line between classic travel and wellness travel.
What do you mean by that? And what do you mean by passive travel or passive
So,
wellness?
so I think in the past, when you ask people, "What do you do on vacation?" they'll usually give you one of like three or four responses, and they're just trying to say, "I need to get away. I need to relax. I need to have a few drinks. I need to hang out with my friends or my wife, or just kind of get away from it." And that's great, and that's definitely a part of travel. That's always going to be a part of travel. But you know what? And there's this other side that if you look at Canyon Ranch 30 years ago,
Right.
what were they developing? They were developing basically at that point. You come to us, we we look at very specific ways that we handle food, your diet, but at the very beginning it was basically low calories, low carb. It wasn't like something focused like Ayurvedic diets, and they were talking about exercise and not much more beyond that. So now we're blurring the two because we realize that wellness, before even the diet and before the exercise, you have this social aspect where being healthy uh, involves having this certain level of um, what's the word that I'm looking for here? You have this level of connection with the people you're with. I think the word is intimacy. I mean, if you are traveling with people, whomever they are, they're close to you because you chose to travel with them. You want to have that intimacy with them. And we know now, not just from Malcolm Gladwell's books, but in general, from all these psychological studies that have been published over the last many years, but we're getting very serious now, that the social aspect of our lives is crucial to wellness. So now we have the diet that we've been looking at for decades. We have exercise that we've been looking for decades. We are making that a little more sophisticated. In our case, we try to do our exercise outside of a gymnasium, outside of an indoor space. When people say, "Hey, if you want that certification, you need to have an indoor gym," I say, "We don't want the certification. Our gym is the outdoors, and if you can't see that, we don't want to be a part of whatever it is that you represent." So we have this amazing outdoor gym where people are breathing in air that has never been anywhere near a city or an industrial area. We have the social aspect because we're providing the environment for people to connect. The employees are connecting with the people because we have a different way of treating them and having them interact with their guests. We're trying to get everything sourced locally, our food. organically. I mean, we're really putting everything together, the air you breathe, the water you drink. And frankly, I think that if you travel without that, you're not getting your money's worth. Vacations are no longer an expense, Casey, they're an investment.
Yeah.
What you invest in your vacation is not just going to be for that 1 or 2 or 3 week period. It's going to be something that lasts longer, that influences your decisions, that makes you live better, that makes you have these beautiful memories, and it lasts way beyond the actual duration of your travel.
There's a couple words there that really resonate with me, and I've been trying to figure out. We've all had 8, 9 months here to be introspective, and I think a lot of people in our industry have left the industry, seeking greener pastures. And it's like, what is it that keeps this crazy bunch in this industry? And I think that the operative word is connection. And whether that's connecting with the self, it's connecting with nature or the land or culture, it's connecting with the people you meet. That's what I believe is so essential to the human experience. And for whatever reason, Costa Rica is so good at delivering that because it's a society that's not afraid to interact and exchange and connect.
Totally.
And then I think another piece of that is this sort of feeling of freedom to roam, particularly when right now that freedom has been severely limited for most of us. Feeling outdoors, feeling free, like a kid on a bicycle. It's a hard feeling to recapture as we get older. And, concepts like what you're attempting to pursue that organically are able to create these moments, that's the stuff people never forget. And that's the kind of travel that really transforms somebody.
You want me to tell you something crazy? Today I had a
Sure.
meeting. I had a meeting with a new employee in our marketing department. She's a veteran from this industry, and she's Costa Rican. Costa Rican in general has done a great job compared to other places of making people, I think, feel at ease. I look at family and friends in the United States and I'm like, damn. I mean, I hate to say it, but I love the U.S. But the level of paranoia and anxiety that has been going on there in people that I love, it pains me. So in Costa Rica, we have a very different scenario, thank God. And this person who's now working with us, actually her first formal day is tomorrow. We had this meeting today and she said, I was at the hotel at my like her first visit to kind of get the hang of it. And she said to me, literally, and she wasn't trying to be flattering or anything like that. She was super honest. She said, oh my God, it changed my life. And she's not a guest. She's like a future employee. She's like, it just being there and talking with the people and seeing this crazy nature and just being there. I got to tell you, she said to me, she said, Gabriel, I got to tell you, I was feeling pretty depressed and being there was like medicine. And we have all this medicine right, at arm's length. It is at our reach, but we're probably filling, a lot of people are filling their mouths with pills because the levels of stress that are going on right now are crazy. And all you need to do, honestly, is get out there, be active, have fun, be a child. And we're doing that. And I just told you, we're doing that not just with the people, we're doing it with our employees, which is like an upward spiral because if our employees feel that, they're gonna project that to the people that are arriving there as guests. So
Completely
it's like,
agree.
boom. Yeah.
We particularly as outsiders and quasi pioneers in this industry, uh, we all do plenty of complaining about what we wish Costa Rica would do differently or would change. What do you think Costa Rica needs to do to remain a tourism leader for the next decade? Because whether by intent or whether on accident, it's hard to argue that this country hasn't done some things very well. So what do you think is essential to set us up for another several decades of success?
I think one of the things that makes us critical, and even Costa Ricans critical, because I'm a naturalized Costa Rican, but for my fellow born Costa Ricans, Um, One of the things that makes us all hypercritical is that we know that this is a very educated society because of the culture and because of the history, which is at this point one and the same. There is a very high level of education here, and because of that, we expect and demand and want more. And I think that's great, as long as we're more positive than we tend to be, because all of us tend to be critical in a negative way. But if we're just critical in a positive way, we can establish a few key points. And yes, um, I think the main point is to continue that level of education, because sometimes we feel like it could change. So I think the first thing that we need to do is make sure that not just in our schools and colleges and universities, we're allowing our, our fellow residents and citizens to get the best of their education, but as in the private sector, because at the end of the day, a lot of things are up to us. Most things are up to us. We need to keep educating people. We need to broaden their perspective, because as it is, comparably speaking, we have a more broader perspective than a lot of our neighbors. But if we keep doing that, Costa Rica is always going to be very different than the other countries of Latin America. I just spent a lot of time in Colombia. I love Colombia. I think the people are beautiful. But even they admit, they're like, wow, you guys in Costa Rica are not 10, 20 years ahead of us. And when they say ahead of us, they're not just talking about development. They're talking about the way of thinking. I think this country is kind of like, one of the focal points of the world. It sounds crazy, but there are some crazy ideas, uh, you know, being fomented here.
I completely agree. I think there's something really special about this place. It's hard to deny. It attracts some really unique people.
Absolutely.
And Pura Vida, being Costa Rican, Tiquicia, it's almost borderline a philosophy at this point, and it's
Yeah.
tangible. On that front, as much as we're always trying to change and progress and advance towards something better, what are the things that you hope never change about Costa Rica?
I always say that as we progress, and that's in quotations, um, as we progress, we have to retain the good things about the third world as we assimilate the good things about the first world. Lately, lately, I've seen Costa Rica assimilate. Lately means 10 years. I've been here 20.
Sure.
Lately, I've seen Costa Rica assimilate the overly litigious nature of our northern neighbors. One of the things that I did not like about the United States, and I had some experience directly with it, is that it's highly litigious. People are fighting all the time for everything. On one hand, I think that's fomented by bad governments. On the other hand, it's cultural, it's society, it's the towns you live in. It's just a mentality of getting more for less, of working little, and anything. And I'm referring to everything from ambulance chasers
Sure.
to doing business.
Sure.
Just I think that Costa Rica 20 years ago was the kind of place where nobody had to sign waivers, and that's refreshing. But the world is not a place like that anymore. So I hope as we go forward, we avoid a lot of that BS, and I'm just putting it bluntly, that you experience in the first world, where everything is so difficult, everything is so litigious. You need a lawyer to go to the bathroom. I mean, that's what it feels like sometimes.
Sure.
You need, and I really hope we slow that progress, that part of the progress down, because it seems inevitable that as you become a developed country, uh, you assimilate that. I don't want that.
And Mike, the thing that I've observed here, um, particularly in the last, let's say, since the last financial crisis, access to credit, which was never previously available here, somewhere, somehow along the way became available. And I've seen a rash of consumerism in Costa Rica
Yes.
that just has exploded. And it does feel like a reckoning is coming for that. And I hope the lesson is learned, because up until now, I always appreciated the fact that Costa Rica seemed to do more with less and be happier with less.
Yeah.
And as much as we constantly compare first world to developing world in terms like gross domestic product, I do think there is something to be said for gross domestic happiness. And that's something that this country always had in spades.
You're totally right.
And I'm a
And
little concerned that now that we're measuring our happiness based on latest model of telephone, car, bigger house, you name it, and that has become facilitated through credit, I'm concerned about where that leads a country and a society.
it's so difficult. You know what? Your point is so much more important than mine.
Ah,
uh, no, because that's like deep rooted culture, and once it roots, it's like a bad weed, man, and
it's like putting toothpaste back in the tube.
impossible. So
Yeah.
I've seen it, dude, and I've seen it really, really up close. I won't get into details, but I've seen I've seen this situation severely harm people
Well,
and their families.
where it became very apparent to me was when at our office, after an employee might depart, the phone would explode for the credit card company. And it had never occurred to me that for the vast majority of these people under 30, that was the first credit card they'd ever had in their hands in their life. It was a new thing.
And they didn't know how to use it. And they're
No,
offering,
I mean,
there's like, oh, now you can buy that television that you don't need and you can pay, 30, $40 a month. And then you can buy that car you want and you can pay $400 a month. And then it adds up to the point where maybe they can afford it, but then something comes along like COVID and there's no stability. They're done in the blink of an eye. And starting over is complicated, as it is in the U.S.
to bring the combo back up to positive for a minute, uh, what do you
Yes.
think it is about Costa Rica that has made it such a leader in tourism? What is it about this country, the brand, the 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 destination, the people? What is it? What when you're telling a friend who hasn't visited ever why they should come, what is it about this place?
So the key differentiate, well, one of the key differentiators is, as we mentioned, education is huge, huge. Uh, I think that that Costa Rica has so many other differentiators in addition to education, which in and of itself is it's enough to say that it's alone in this region. Um, but in addition to that, you talked about the geology, and I'll get into something anthropological because we started to see if we're going to get into biology, but the geological and anthropological reason is very important. You said that Costa Rica is like a point where the continents come together and the topography is a lot more dynamic than in the neighboring countries or anything around. It's obviously a place where things were connecting or disconnecting. So when the conquistadores arrived here, there was indigenous populations, but they were kind of distributed in smaller geographical areas. It wasn't like the typical Mesoamerican uh, cultures of a little bit further north, like the Mayas, but there's many more that were gigantic populations of literally not thousands, but maybe hundreds of thousands. And here it wasn't like that. Here there were smaller communities, typical of older times. Uh, the hunter-gatherer community type thing. So when the conquistadores came in, it wasn't this violent clash. It was a more slow assimilation, mitigated by the land, by the geology, by the topography. That worked in favor, I think, for the history of Costa Rica because people when they have different cultures tend not to get along. But when you have land kind of doing its mitigation, call it the Pachamama doing beautiful spiritual work, you have this very slow process. And, the different cultures started to work together. Maybe they combined, maybe they're assimilated, whatever happened. It provided a more mixed culture that hasn't forgotten its roots, I think, in most cases. So you have this melting pot. I think a lot of people speak of the United States as a melting pot, but the United States was a melting pot up till about 100 years ago. Now it's now it's very much sui generis. It's its own thing. Um, I wouldn't call it a melting pot anymore. If the United States is a melting pot, everywhere is a melting pot. Costa Rica is a true mixture of cultures, and it's happened so slowly and so organically. Another word that is very useful here because it applies for a lot of things. That it has been, it has led to a relatively, actually, a comparably very peaceful society. Whether you compare it to Nicaragua or Chile or the United States, I'm mentioning countries of different levels of wealth. But at the end of the day, Costa Rica, I think, offers more stability than any of the aforementioned.
Don't you think we were fortunate to have not had significant gold? Meaning, if they had a huge deposit of gold here, this could have been Peru, this could have been Bolivia. In that this Spanish didn't send massive amounts of
Yes.
alcaldes and
Yes.
and garrisons down here,
Yeah. No gold 600 years ago. No petroleum 20 years ago.
right?
Costa Rica's natural resources are, for me, the most valuable resources in the world. Yet, fortunately, the world hasn't picked up on that yet.
Right?
So we've kind of stayed out of the radar, despite the fact that our name says it all, Costa Rica. And when they named it Costa Rica, initially, apparently it was because of the gold, because of the gold that they thought was here.
Right?
But the Rica applies much more so today than it did back in the days of exploration.
Yeah, it's funny how weaknesses eventually become strengths and strengths become weaknesses. It's all perspective, right?
Yeah.
Well, Gabriel, I could talk to you all day about this, and sometimes we do. But it was
I
great
look forward,
talking with
I
you,
look forward to that very
and
much.
and let's do it again soon.
Cheers, bro. Have a
Have a
beautiful
pleasant evening.
weekend.
Thank you for talking, and I'll see you soon.
Pura vida.
Ciao.
Let's talk tourism.